What's up, people? Hotep Jesus. We back. Another sharp conversation with Hotep Jesus. Oh my God. Hotep to the family.
Hotep.
It feels good to be back. It feels good to be here. Wonderful guest for you today. Before we get into that, make sure you go check out Syscoin. Syscoin is supporting my channel this month. Syscoin is the best of both worlds, best of BTC, best of Ethereum. So you got the security of Bitcoin, flexibility of Ethereum. Make sure you go check them out. It's not financial advice. Devs, if you're looking to develop on a network, check out Syscoin. Maybe it's something you might be interested in. But without further ado, I have a wonderful guest today. Amaury, do me a favor, slide to your left just a little bit.
Yeah, is that better?
Oh, that's wonderful. Amaury, the GOAT. Ladies and gentlemen, many of you might not know it, but the guy you see on your screen here is the mastermind behind some of the greatest projects to ever touch this planet. One of them being Bitcoin Cash. Now moving on to Ecash. Amaury, first and foremost, how are you? How are you feeling? Are you in good health? Are you in good spirits?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Today is a good day for me.
Today's a good day. Shout out to Ice Cube. We're just gonna dive right into this information. First, I want to talk about the recent crypto crash, right? Luna and all of that stuff like that, and then we're gonna dive into some Bitcoin history, Bitcoin philosophy, and pick your brain about that stuff. And I think that conversation could get technical, and please do not hold back. We want all the education on this channel for our viewers.
Okay.
So let's get into it. The other day, media basically said, the markets said we are no longer. First of all, it used this term. It said that it's not decoupled. I don't think the word is. It pegged. Okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Luna was pegged to UST, and that was broken. Explain what that means and how is that even possible?
Okay, so, well, yeah, Luna is a stable coin. And the goal of a stable coin is to produce, cryptocurrency whose value is going to track some assets. Quite often this is the USD, but, there are stable coins that track the value of gold or the value of the euro or other currencies, right? But,
okay, so this stable coin tracks the value of the dollar.
Yeah, so this one tracks the value of the dollar. And so, on the market, there is supply and demand and everything, right? So the value of things vary all the time. And so there are different ways to try to peg the value of that token to the value of $1. Luna specifically is a category of stablecoin that is called algorithmic stablecoin. So it's a stablecoin whose value is maintained automatically, until it isn't by an algorithm. And the algorithm rely on a secondary token, and the property of that secondary token are going to change either to attract capital or to the contrary to, when there is enough capital that is in the system to, not get more. So that when the value tends to go down, you want to attract more capital in it. And when the value goes up, you want to stop capital from flowing in. And that's basically the basic idea behind algorithmic stablecoin is that.
Right there.
Stop
right there. Because already I don't know what the hell is going on.
Okay, that's fine. Ask any question.
Yeah. So how, right? Like, what is happening with Luna that's giving UST its stability? Like, people have to buy Luna? Are the owners of the directors and operators of Luna pumping capital into Luna to stabilize UST, or are they depending on the market to do that? How is that happening?
Yeah, so they depend on the market. There is a secondary token. So it's Luna and Terra, and one of them is the stable coin, and the other one is that algorithmic coin. And so the idea is that, if there are that many Luna in circulation, you want it to be worth a certain amount of money that match the USD value of the USDT that you are transacting. And And so what you want to be doing is that if the value of the asset that are locked in the system are below the value of the USDT, the UST, then the value of the UST is going to go down. So you need to attract more capital into the system. And vice versa, if there is too much capital into the system, then the value of UST is going to go above $1. And so you want to put in place mechanism that's going to prevent the flow of capital in the system. In that case, right? So on one side of that system, you have people who want a stable coin. And on the other side of the system, you have people that are willing to absorb the risk of people wanting more or less of USDT. So you have these second coins, like it's a financial way to split, like you have the stable coin on one side and you have like all the risk that is brought on the other side. And
the
with
risk
that
is with Luna in that case.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. UST is worth $1, at least in theory. Right. And Luna, the price of Luna varies. Right. And depending on the price of Luna, the characteristic of Luna are going to vary as well to attract more people or to stop attracting people.
So when you say attract people, is this the marketing of Luna that's going to attract people to?
No, it's like, so you're going to have things like interest rate, for instance,
okay,
or coins that get burned to reduce the supply. This kind of mechanism is going to, increase the value of Luna. And because now you have a prospect that the value of Luna is going to increase, then you can invest in and that gets capital flowing in, right? And when there is too much capital that is flowing in, then those different kind of reward, they are going to diminish. And all of that is computed by an algorithm. It's not like someone that is, tweaking the knobs. It's like there is an algorithm that calculates what is happening on the market of UST.
Yeah.
And analyzing, if it's going up or going down, and that is going to tweak the characteristic of Luna based on that.
I got you. Makes sense. Continue.
Okay. So, well, then what happens is that you have those mechanisms to exert control on the price, but price fixing is a very risky exercise on markets in general. And at some point, you can have a move on the market that is so big or so brutal, like it happened suddenly, that those mechanisms, they are not powerful enough to keep things, within the right range. And when that doesn't happen, typically the price goes to zero very, very, very quickly. And this is not the first time we see that. There have been a few other stable coins in the past that have had similar stories.
Algorithmic coins?
Algorithmic stable coins, which is category of stable coins that, Luna is an example of.
So
another big one is MakerDAO. Maybe you're familiar with that one. Is very big on the Ethereum network. There is DAI and MakerDAO. Those are like the two coins, and one is pegged to $1, and the other one is these other coins of which the characteristics are going to change to attract or stop attracting capital in the system to maintain the $1 peg.
Okay. So in Luna's case, I heard a conspiracy theory about the powers that be bought 34 billion worth of it in or something like that, then they dumped on the market. Is something similar to that what happened, or how exactly did this crash come about?
Yeah, it's difficult to know. There are several theories, and it's very difficult to know which one is right or if it's another one. The thing is, Luna has grown quite dramatically, very quickly in a way that was not super sustainable. So at the end of the day, this is what allows an actor with a lot of capital to take advantage of the situation. And it's very possible. Like we know, for instance, for a fact that several people had bet, many millions of dollars on the peg breaking, within a year, and it was 3 months ago, roughly. So those people clearly, if they're willing to bet millions of dollars, they have a lot of capital behind them. So they may be, they may be at the origin of the big sell-off. But who knows? It's very difficult to know who actually did that.
Right. We don't know who, but we know somebody dumped on the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably that person had the big short, on the other side of that and made a lot of money.
Indeed. So you said something along the lines of this thing was growing without stability, right?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like, what was...
Well, they were offering, but I don't have the exact number in mind, but something like 20% API, something like that, which
interest, right?
Yeah. And, like if you can do 20% a year consistently, I mean, you're better than Warren Buffett, right? As an investor. So when you start seeing those kind of number, you always need to be a bit worried and a bit careful. Those kind of numbers tend to be not sustainable. And in that case, that wasn't.
So then once people lose confidence,
I think, I think one of the things that happened in the crypto market is that we've seen swings that are so wild in the past that people have a bit of a skewed expectation of what kind of number are expected on the market, right? Like if you can make 10% a year trading, you're a good trader, right? If you can make 20%, you are one of the best trader in the world. Right? If you can do that consistently, maybe you can do that 1 year because you got lucky. But if you can do that consistently and manage the upside and the risk and all of that, you are one of the best trader if you can do 20% in the world. And we see plenty of crypto projects that, promote this kind of return, sometimes even way more. And every time you see this kind of number, you got to be cognizant of the fact that it's probably not sustainable.
Yeah, you got my mind wandering now. Wow. Okay. Do me a favor, just slide to your left a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question or you'd like to contribute to the channel, that's fine. Go ahead, drop a super chat. If you'd like to support the channel, also Cash App, $ Hotep Jesus. Now the business is handled. You said this has happened before with other coins. This is something that you've seen in the past.
Yeah, not so big though.
Oh, this is one of the bigger ones?
Yeah, I think this is the biggest one so far in terms of stablecoin that collapsed. Yeah.
I have my money in an interest-bearing crypto account. Well, some of my money, little bit, right? It hasn't failed yet.
Well, first, good move. You don't want to put all your money in the same place.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Generally, like good advice, but I see many people in the crypto space that tell you to do the exact opposite. And they're like, yeah, put everything on that, track credit card debt and whatever. Like, just don't do that. I mean, like for a few people, they're going to get very lucky and it's going to pan out and they're going to make great return. But for every single person for which that happens, there is like a bazillion of people that lose everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to just get bottomed out, as zeroed out. What's the other?
Yeah, there's no bottom, right? Zero is the bottom.
Exactly.
Like sometimes people are like, hey, it lost 90%. Like, how bad can it be? Well, it can lose 90% again. There is like, there is no floor.
Are you familiar?
Except zero.
Are you familiar with what's the name of that company? The big one that sells Coinbase. They just recently had a crash. I believe that was in their stock though, and people started pulling out of Coinbase. Why are so many people pulling out of Coinbase? Do you know what happened with that situation?
So, well, probably each one of those people, they have their own reason to do that, right? But many of the discussion were around the term of service of Coinbase, where they effectively now explain in their term of service that if Coinbase is going belly up, then the money that is on the exchange is gone, right? And for me, it's kind of funny because people, like every cycle of crypto, every few years, you have a new wave of people that come in and that needs to learn the hard way, the lesson that happened before. But what they describe in their term of service is something that was always true. It's just that they didn't explicitly say it before. But as early at Mt. Gox, right? In the very early day of Bitcoin. I think it was 2011 that Mt. Gox went belly up. It was the first big Bitcoin exchange. It went belly up, and all the money that was on the exchange is gone, right? This is what happens, and this is where the sentence "not your keys, not your coins" come from. You probably have heard that. When your money is at Coinbase, it's not, in your control with your own key. If Coinbase fail for whatever reason, your money is gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's I find it kind of funny that people are freaking out about that, because it was always true. And exchange going belly up is something that happened in the past. Though I think the risk for Coinbase is fairly low, right? It's a big actor, very well established.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if they go belly up, a bazillion other exchanges are gonna go belly up before them, right?
Right. Yeah. I think, like you said, this is something that we knew, but I don't think the general customer of crypto knew, right? Understood. So
yeah, I've seen a lot of people freaking out about that.
So, but Coinbase can do that. They can just run away with your coins legally. Like, they went bankrupt and they're like, oh, well, we're going to liquidate your coins. Where's that? Crypto has to go somewhere.
Technically, they are not your coins once you deposit it to them. And I mean, it's the same with your bank. It's why you have interest rate in your bank account, right? Because technically you're loaning your money to the bank. It's not your money anymore. You have an IOU, like the banks owes you money because you lend them money, right? And it's the same with an exchange. They don't, like, the money is not yours anymore. The money is being traded in the exchange. And what you have is an IOU that Coinbase or whatever exchange you use is going to pay you back whatever you are on your account, if, whenever you demand it.
Okay, so then that leads me to my next question. Best type of wallet: hard wallet, paper wallet, some other type of wallet? What type of wallet? Let's just say for BTC, right? What type of wallet should people have? Because I'm hearing paper wallet is the way to go. Is that true?
I mean, it really depends on the risk you're worried about. But I'd say, like, if you have big amounts, you want to have a hardware or a paper wallet somewhere. Because I mean, like, let's be realistic, even if you know computer pretty well, and I'd say, like, especially people who know computer pretty well know that they are very difficult to secure. People who don't know them very well, they may be under the illusion that it's easier, but it's not. And your private key is gonna leak only once, right? Once it's out there, it's out there. So you're always one mistake away from losing your money. And so if you want to have a live wallet for convenience, it's good, but it's like your actual wallet, right? You don't want to put millions of dollars in your wallet in your pocket, because you may lose it, or you may, someone might steal it from you or whatever, right? So you want to have the kind of money in there that you need on a daily basis, but not months and months of savings, right? Same with crypto. In your live wallet on your phone or on your laptop or whatever you want to use, you want to have the kind of amount that you do transaction with typically, right? For that to be convenient, but you want to have your saving either in a hardware wallet or a paper wallet.
Or a paper wallet.
Yeah, and paper wallet, but probably not in paper. Like, the word paper wallet is generic. If this is real amount of money, you probably want to engrave that in the plate of metal. Some people do that, for instance, or like you want to put that on some durable material, right? You want and put that in a secure place.
So basically what you're saying, paper wallet, explain what a paper wallet is. It just means you just wrote that in keys somewhere.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? So to do transaction with any cryptocurrency, all the specifics are going to change, the technical specific, but the basic idea is that you have a private key. It's a secret number that you need to run some computation. And the goal of the computation is to prove that you know the private key and you authorize the transaction without revealing the private key. If you can do that, everybody on the network can verify and decide that the transaction is valid. So if someone else has your private key, they can do the same transaction as you would with your coins, right? For the network, there is no difference. So if your private key leaks to anywhere, whoever have access to that leak can spend your money instead of you, and probably send it to themselves.
Right.
So what you're gonna do instead is write that private key down on some piece of hardware, right? That is not connected to the internet. And we call that a paper wallet, though it doesn't need to be paper, right? But printing them on a sheet of paper is a very convenient way to do it. No, be careful. If you print that on a sheet of paper, you do that for a computer that is not connected to the internet, or you lose you lose all the benefit of doing it, right? Because the goal is to have your private key somewhere that is not connected to the internet. So do that offline. And on that paper, you are going to have either what is called a seed phrase. So it's a list of words that you can type into a wallet to recover the money, or sometimes a QR code that you can flash and recover the money that way. And either that seed phrase or that QR code is a representation of your private key that the wallet can understand. And so you're going to keep that in some place very secure. And basically that's the ID, right? And you can put your saving on there.
Okay.
Well,
so,
on there, it's not like physically on there, right? This
Right.
People have a bit of a trouble to understand, but all of that is numbers, right?
Yeah.
And associated with that number, that is the private key, there is an account or an address or whatever, depending on the system, and that one is going to be your saving accounts or your saving address.
If I have $1 million worth of whatever, that's a tremendous amount of responsibility we're dealing with, Amaury. Like,
yes,
if I have my bank and I have $1 million in the bank, when they lose my money, it's FDIC insured. So tell me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the future of crypto is an insurance.
I think there are services that are effectively like bank lags that would be very beneficial for the space. I think people are a bit naive about that, but securing $1 million is not that easy, right? And you probably don't want to do, like, we see that in the news actually quite regularly, where you have like crypto people that brag about having made like big amount of money with crypto and stuff like that, and you see people like going to them and rob them effectively, right? And well, yeah, like physical security is difficult.
Yeah.
So if you have but you can even go in a bank, like in some banks you can rent a locker that is going to be secure in a vault or something, right? And you can put a paper wallet in there, for instance. Some people do that. But yeah, if you have millions of dollars to put on a paper wallet, you probably don't want to put it under your mattress, right? You want to think carefully about where you put it in the place that is secure, against attack, but also in a place that is secure, like it's not gonna flood or catch fire or something like that, right? Because same thing. That's why people engrave them in plates of metal rather than paper, right? Because plates of metal is likely to survive a fire, whereas the paper is not, right? Or a flood. And I mean, okay, it's unlikely that your house is gonna catch fire, but are you willing to bet $1 million on it?
Exactly. It's a lot of responsibility, man. And I think that, some people, they're like, hey, the banking industry, evil, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. However, the price of freedom is responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, enough with the basic stuff. I just want to get my audience caught up on what's happening here and what they're getting themselves into with crypto. Let's dive into some juiciness, as if we haven't gotten juicy already. Should we talk about that? Or, no, let's talk about let's go in order. Store of value, medium of exchange. BTC to me is not money. It's more like maybe gold or speculative asset. Agree, disagree?
Agree. And I think most people in Bitcoin would agree, right? They say it's digital gold. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So then they'll pop up and say, and I'll say, well, Satoshi intended for this to be a peer-to-peer version of digital cash to allow transactions from one peer to another without the need of a financial institution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. That's not BTC. So what they say is we have this cool thing called the Lightning Network. Mm-hmm. Is the Lightning Network a good solution for the peer-to-peer transactions?
I'm not convinced it is. So, but some people are gonna tell you, oh, it's evil and yada yada. I'm not convinced of that either. But I'm actually in agreement with Joseph Poon. I don't know if you're familiar with Joseph Poon, but he's one of the creator of Lightning Network. Actually, the Lightning Network have been invented by Joseph Poon and Taj Turia. So Joseph Poon is one of the two behind it. And he was like, okay, if we assume that the Lightning Network is adopted on Bitcoin at scale, and we want to make that a global, network for money, we would go from needed 2 gigabytes block to about 300 megs blocks, right? Something like that by his estimation. I think his estimation are a bit optimistic, but this is probably in the right ballpark.
It sounded like you just decreased the block size.
The block size that you would need to support, a global payment network on the system. So if you don't have the Lightning Network, according to Joseph Poon's estimation, if you don't have the Lightning Network, you would need 2 gigabytes blocks.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Right?
Okay.
And with the Lightning Network, he estimates that you would need maybe 300 blocks.
Oh, okay. I got you.
All right.
All right.
Whereas the blocks on Bitcoin right now are 1 meg, right? So it's like more than 2 orders of magnitude away from where it needs to be.
Yes.
With the Lightning Network. Right. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that the Lightning Network is more of a trade-off than the solution. Well, many solutions are, right? But what you're trading with the Lightning Network is that now the security is active rather than passive, right? So if you have Bitcoin saved on your paper wallet, you can let them there forever and nothing is going to happen to those coins, right? You don't need to do anything active to keep those coins secure. When you are using the Lightning Network, you need to have a machine that is connected to the network all the time, that's going to watch what's happening on the network and react in the right way to ensure your security.
Or give that responsibility to somebody else.
Or you can pay someone to do it for you. Yes. But either way, the security model goes from passive to being active, which is always a problem because this system that needs to watch the network, it may fail in some way, and then you're susceptible to attacks. And the second trade-off you're making is with liquidity. You need to find channels and you need to find routes through, like if you want to pay someone effectively, I'm going to have a channel. Let's say I want to send a payment to you through Lightning Network, but we probably don't have a channel directly, because you won't have like all the user have a channel one by one with, everybody, right? So, but I'm going to have a channel with someone that have a channel with someone that have a channel with someone that have a channel with you, right? And in each one of those channels, there needs to be a sufficient amount of money for the value of the payment to be able to travel through that.
Right.
And so what's happening is that very quickly, as you make bigger payments, the amount of money that you need to lock in the network as a whole become completely astronomical. And so that you will only be able to do small value payments on there. And when I say small value payment, like $100 already require absurd amount of money. Like we're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars that needs to be locked on those channels for, like every 2 pair of users have a decent chance of being able to pay even $100 to each other. So in itself, that's an issue. And it's interesting, right? Because it's very much what traditional payment systems are doing. They are trading liquidity for convenience. Like they provide a huge amount of liquidity and they do a settlement transaction between themselves once in a while. So the technicals, the details of the system are completely different from traditional finance, but effectively you're making the same trade-off.
And And if one of those channels fails, poof, bye-bye goes your Bitcoin, no?
No, the Bitcoin is not gone, but the payment doesn't go through.
The payment just fails.
Yeah.
So you propose what solution then? Because Satoshi meant for Bitcoin to be money. Bitcoin BTC at least is not money, and that's fine. I actually like it as gold. So what can be money? Is it Ecash?
Well, I hope. I hope so. At least I'm doing my best for it to be the case. So the fundamental realization, like if you want to understand what you are doing, the fundamental realization is that the dichotomy between store of value and medium of exchange is bad. Let's say
it's what you cut out. You said what?
Bad, right? Like it's this whole debate is a debate that we should not be having. We should be building something that has the property of both. Because at the end of the day, this is not even a different property, because store of value is actually a medium of exchange through time.
Yes.
Like
yes.
you are sending money to yourself in the future when effectively,
yeah.
Or at least you can describe it that way. And so at the end of the day, this is just the same. This is just the same property, and all the mess that we see with traditional finance come from the fact that we don't have a technology that is good at both. So you want to have those properties that Bitcoin has, where you have like a limited supply and basically hard money properties, right? So limited supply, divisible, fungible, blah blah blah. But you also want that to be a good medium of exchange. So you want to work on scalability solutions. And one thing that is quite amazing is that the design that is proposed by Satoshi with very little changes can actually scale pretty big. And I mean, I have a good news and a bad news. There is another project that is working on the same technical solution as we are. It's the Project Hamilton from the CDBC, right? So clearly they think that the technology is good as well. But I hope that people are gonna choose ours rather than theirs, because I don't like the worst that is coming if people choose theirs.
I was gonna ask you about the CBDC.
Well, so technically it's very similar to what we're building, at least on the scalability front.
Yeah.
So but I don't know if you want to go in the detail, but
absolutely I do.
Okay. So Bitcoin, the principle behind Bitcoin is a UTXO model, right? It's quite different from Ethereum, for instance, that is an account model. So the account model is probably something people are very familiar with, because if you have a bank account, like the whole banking system works on the account model, right? You have an account and you can put and remove money on it and stuff like that. The UTXO model is a bit different.
You're talking about user transaction operations?
Excuse me?
What is UTXO? User transaction operation?
UTXO is unspent transaction output.
Unspent transaction output. Okay.
Okay. So when you do a transaction on Bitcoin, it has a set of inputs and a set of outputs, right? And in each of those outputs, there are going to be what is called a redeem script. So it's a script that describes the condition under which this coin can be respent, right? So if I'm sending money to you, I'm going to do a transaction that have two outputs. One that have a redeem script with your address, right? The redeem script is going to say, oh, if you can sign the transaction with the private key that is yours, then you can respend the coin. And the other one is going to be an address of mine for the change. And the inputs are going to be a set of UTXO that I control and that I'm using to fund that transaction, right? Because I cannot create money out of thin air. It needs to come from somewhere. And so now all the transactions that I refer to in my inputs are gone from the database, and two new UTXO have been created, one for you and one for me. And those UTXO are immutable, right? They are created, they stay the same way, and when they are spent, they are gone. Poof, right?
Okay.
So it's different from the account model, where the account stays there forever, and money is added to the account, and money is removed from the account, and money is added from the account, and so on, right?
Okay.
In that case, you have UTXO, and every time you do transaction, you destroy UTXO and you create new ones. Technically, it's, at least, intuitively, it's probably a bit harder to wrap your head around it, but technically it has very good properties. Because anything that has to do with mutation imply ordering. Like if you want to do several transactions that involve an account, they all need to be ordered in a very specific way, right? Because the state of affairs is going to change, and each transaction depends on the state of affairs, right? So if I send several transactions, sending money to different people, at some point my account is going to run out of money, and the transactions that are before that point, they are going to go through, and the transactions that are after that point, they are not going to go through, right? So all the transactions that involve my account, they need to be sequentially ordered, right? They need to be happening in a specific order.
Yeah.
Whereas because UTXO you create and you delete them, for each transaction is binary. Either the UTXO exists or the UTXO don't exist, and there is no notion of order. And because there is no notion of order, you can scale the system much faster because you can do all of it in parallel. And so like that's a high level overview. So in Bitcoin, first you have this UTXO model that is inherently way more parallel than the account model. And then if we change the block format, so in BTC, there is a constraint in the block format that the transaction needs to be topologically ordered within the block. That means that all the transactions that are in the block, if some transaction is spending money, the transaction that is funding that money needs to happen before in the block.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, like that's what you say intuitively, and this is why it's been programmed that way. But that's actually not a good property. You want to get rid of it, and you don't need it. Really? Yeah. And the reason is because it's another step in the process where you need to do things sequentially. And when you do things sequentially, it doesn't scale. And what you want to do instead is that you want to go over all the whole block. You want to add all the outputs of all the transaction in the UTXO set. And then you do a second pass on the block where you spend all the inputs. And
that's interesting.
Like the overall computation is gonna like check out or not. You're gonna know it.
Yeah.
And that means that you can do all of that in parallel. Like you can have each one of those two steps can be done in parallel. You can have like as many CPU cores or even as many machines in parallel doing a chunk of the block in any order, and then do the second step.
Because all the details are inside the block.
Yeah, you treat the block itself as an atomic operation, effectively. That's going to happen as a whole or not happen at all.
Okay.
Right. And this is something that we change on BCH, that we change on Ecash. This is something that the project Hamilton is adopting as well. And it allows to verify blocks.
Who's adopting it? You said who's adopting it?
Project Hamilton, which is the...
Oh, they've adopted this?
The CDBC. Yeah, they are adopting.
They stole your shit.
Well,
it's you guys are using the same technology.
We're using a similar solution, though. There are some details that are different, but the idea is similar. And also, like you say, they stole my stuff, but like I'm not the only one
doing that
who came up with those ideas, right? Like this is.
I'm just trying to start shit.
when you think about scaling, and so I don't know, like people probably don't know, but before working on that, I was working at Facebook, and this is kind of like when those scalability issue they started to rise in crypto. This is when I decided that I would be involved more on the technical front. Before that, I was not involved technically very much, because before that the problem were more like cryptography and security and stuff like that, which I know about, but are not my expertise. Whereas when the problem became scalability, I was like, okay, like no, this is something that I know a lot about, so I should get involved. And one of the key things, if you want to make your system scalable, is to remove anything that is sequentially ordered.
And just have
because let's imagine Facebook. If you had to process all the stuff that people post on Facebook in a sequential manner, right? Like you would have a waiting line, you know, you would be typing your message and pressing submit, and the website would tell you, hey, your message is going to be visible in like 2 hours and a half, right? Because you would have to wait for everybody that, you know, is in the queue before you. So if you want to make a scalable system, you cannot do things serially that way. It just doesn't work. You want to find a way to make them in parallel. Because now if your system is twice as big, you can throw twice as much resources at the problem and it still works. And when the problem is twice as big, presumably you're going to have twice as much resources, right? Because now the business that is going on is twice as big.
I'm 50% there understanding this. It seems like the information of the transaction, instead of happening sequentially, what you're saying is that it's happening simultaneously. They're being processed, at the same time, all within the same storage space. Yes, no.
I'm not sure what you mean by all the same storage space.
Well, if it's a block that's only 1 megabyte, it's all happening within that. The information's all happening instead of.
So what you could do, right? So what the BTC software does when you process the 1 megabyte blocks is that it goes over all the transactions one by one in the block and verify that the inputs correspond to existing outputs, destroy those outputs, and then creates the input of the transaction and then move to the next one. Right? The problem when you do that is that it becomes like the bigger the block and the longer it takes to do it. And there is nothing you can do to change that. Like there is no amount of money that you can throw at the problem to make it faster.
So your solution is what now?
So if you want to be able to do that faster when there are more transactions, you want to be able to do transaction not sequentially, but in parallel. Right? You want to have a system that does, you know, all the transaction, but at the same time, that doesn't have to wait for the previous transaction to finish before doing the next one. Right?
So because you're saying if you're doing a transaction,
you can have twice as many CPU cores, twice as many servers, twice as many whatever, you're going to be able to process the block twice as fast.
So real quick, if you're transacting with another individual and I'm transacting with another individual, you're saying with the BTC, I'll have to wait for your transaction to go through and then my transaction to go through. And your solution, you're saying, is both transactions will happen simultaneously. Is that what you're saying? Or no? If I'm completely off and I sound stupid, tell me.
No, but I'm trying to see how I'm gonna bridge what you're describing me to where I'm at in my explanation. So yeah, effectively, because you want to prevent double spend, like at the core of the problem is that you want to prevent double spend. You want to prevent someone from spending the same money twice. This is the hard problem, right? Therefore, you need to order things in some way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm sending some money to you and I'm sending the same money to someone else, the network is going to have to decide which one of the two transactions happened first. Right? And because they cannot both happen.
You're saying which one transaction happened first? You're saying your transaction with A and B or my transaction with X, right? You're talking about that or what? Because I want to understand what you're saying by transactions.
So my transaction and your transaction don't really need to be ordered relative to each other because it comes from a different pool of money.
Yes.
So those are never going to be double spend of each other, right? Okay. But what I can do if I'm a malicious actor is that I can set a transaction where I send money to you, and then I can send a transaction where I send the same money, say, to Coinbase to fund my account there, right? And there is it's very difficult for the network to decide which one of those two transactions is the true ones, right? Because everybody is going to see those transactions in the different order depending on how they propagate it on the network, right? Some of them are going to see the transaction where I send the money to you, and some of them are going to see the transaction where I send the money to Coinbase. But those two transactions cannot possibly be both correct at the same time, right? One of them has to be invalid. And so the network as a whole needs to come in agreement as to which one is valid and which one is not valid. And this is happening by putting transaction in blocks, and effectively the one that is in the blocks is going to be considered the valid one, and everybody is going to agree to reject the other one. Even if previously they saw it in a different order, they're going to agree that, you know, the order in the block is, well, the one that is in the block is the valid one, and the other one is not valid. Now, somewhat counterintuitively, that doesn't mean that you have to process the transaction in the block sequentially, right? Because if the block is valid, there is no double spend in the block. Right?
Okay.
The double spend is not in the block.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So presumably all the transactions that are in the block are not double spend of each other. So you can process them all in parallel. And if there is a problem during that processing, an input missing or something like that, then you know that the block is invalid because there are two transactions that double spend. But in that case, you don't really care about which one was first and which one was not first. What you care is that there is a double spend in that block, therefore I reject the whole block. Right? So when you think about it that way, you realize that ordering the transaction in topological order, which is the technical term, describing the way Bitcoin does it, is actually not necessary. And now the problem is that if you want to do that on Bitcoin, you could process all the transaction in parallel on Bitcoin. You know, when I say Bitcoin, I mean BTC. But then you would have to verify that the block is properly topologically ordered. Otherwise, it's not a valid block.
Right.
And the problem is that verifying that first, it's not useful, right? It's like a verification that you don't need to do. But second, it's a verification that cannot be done in parallel. That's inherently sequential. The algorithm you have to use to do that is sequential. And therefore, it's always going to be slow if you grow the block size very big.
Interesting.
So if you want to be scalable, you need to get rid of that constraint. You want to say to the miner, you don't need to put the transaction in the block in topological order. We are gonna get rid of that constraint. If you get rid of that constraint, you gain a lot of scalability.
You just dump the information in there.
You put all the transaction in there. The way we do it, but it's not necessary. I think the project at Milton, they don't require any order specifically. They can put the transaction in the other order. The way we do it is that you have to order the transaction by transaction ID in the block. The reason we do that is because it allows some optimization in transmitting the block between two peers. Because there are techniques that are called the set reconciliation techniques that can be used, because those two peers, they're gonna have mostly the same set of transactions, right? Before the block arrived, they monitor the network and they gather transaction in what we call the mempool. And the content of the mempool of those two nodes is gonna be not exactly the same, but fairly similar, right? And so you can rely on that fact to send information that is probabilistic in nature, that's gonna allow the other node with a very high degree of probability to reconstruct the block. And if that fails, then the node say, well, I don't know what to do with your probabilistic message, send me the full block. But you can do it in such a way so that 98 or 99% of the time, the probabilistic way works. And what is good is that the message that you need to send now grows with the expected differences between the mempool of the two blocks and not the size of the block per se.
Okay. And
to be able to do that, you have a problem if you can put the transaction in any order in the block. Because now you just don't need to send just like the transaction themselves, but you also need to send in what order the transaction are. And maybe counterintuitively, in what order the transaction are, when the block grows big, actually dominates the amount of information that you have to transmit.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually more information to transmit in what order the transaction are than to transmit the transaction themselves beyond a certain block size.
Right.
And so this is why we order the transaction by transaction ID, so that if you know what transactions are in the block, you know in what order they are.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting. I see super chats coming in. I'm gonna get to you guys in a second. Tobias, Ruck, Carol, Criminy, Jay Pylon, great questions you guys got coming in. We're definitely gonna get those answered. Actually, let me ask Tobias's question now, since we're on the topic, and you kind of answered it, but he said difference in similarities between BTC and Ecash.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do that. So to begin with, Ecash is a fork of BTC. So there are obviously a lot of similarity. The whole UTXO model is similar. The transaction format is similar. So typically, all the software that works on BTC can be used on Ecash with very little modification. And this is a design decision that we intend to keep, because developing ecosystem, and there's a lot of software that already works for BTC, so we don't want to break that, right? But we tweaked a few things. One of them is this notion of ordering in the block, because it allows us to have much better scalability than Bitcoin. We also have much bigger block size, presumably. The block size limit. The block size themselves is going to depend on the many transactions are made, right? But we're not going to hit the roof the way Bitcoin is when a lot of people are using it. And so this is the state of affairs right now. And we are deploying a technology called Avalanche. It's now it's almost there, right? It's going to be very, very soon. And what this technology allows is like a lot of different stuff, but mainly almost instant transaction confirmation, the order of 2 seconds. Instead of having to wait for a block, for the transaction to be mined in the block, you can have it like in 2 seconds, confirm, and it cannot be double spent. So that's great value, especially for the merchant more than for the users, right? Because for a merchant, you need to know that the money is actually yours. It's not gonna go poof, right?
Right.
So for the recipient of the payment, it's very important. It also increased the security when it comes to 51% attacks and stuff like that.
Okay. Very interesting. Thank you, Carol. All right, we're going to get into some of these questions that the chat has in a moment. I heard something interesting. I heard that some opcodes were removed from BTC. Is this true? And potentially, what capabilities have been removed from BTC that may be interesting, necessary, unnecessary, but fun, creative? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so there were a fair amount of opcodes that were disabled in the early version of BTC for good reason. The implementation of those opcodes was actually insecure. It was not done the right way, and so if they were not disabled, the would not be what it is today. So that was necessary. Generally, what you can do with those specific opcodes is fairly overblown, as far as I can tell. Like people imagine that you can do all you can do with Ethereum and stuff like that with those opcode, but you really cannot. You can do a bit more than you can do today with Bitcoin, but not a crazy amount more. Though there is one opcode that we've added that exists on BCH and on Ecash that is called DataSig verify, and object DataSig and object DataSig verify. And that opcode allows you to verify signature on custom data, and data was open tremendous number of use cases, way beyond what we anticipated originally. So that one is good, but that one is not an opcode that was disabled that we were enabled. It's a new opcode that we've added in there.
Okay.
But more generally, so the trade-off, I think it's an interesting question. The trade-off that you make between the UTXO model and the account model, like Ethereum is using, is that the account model allows you to do a lot more when it comes to smart contracts and stuff like that. Whereas the UTXO model is not going to allow as much on that front, but it's going to be able to leverage those limitations to be much more scalable and much more robust in various ways. And really, for us, what is really important is to make a technology that's good store valued, good medium of exchange. That is both, right? Not one of the other. Like we don't get involved in that debate. I think it's a toxic debate. You want a technology that is good at both, and so the UTXO model is much more suitable to do that. Like this is where the real deal is, right? Because okay, we talked about that a bit before the show, but I think this is probably the right time to point it out. If you look at the legacy financial system, it comes about for a reason. It's not, it's not lizard people that came out of the sky one day and that decided, oh, the banks are gonna work that way. It's people, they had a problem, and so they came up with a solution, and they had another problem, and they came up with a solution, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, you have what we have now. Right. And the problem that they had originally is that they didn't have a technology that is a good store value and a good medium of exchange. This is the core problem that they are trying to solve. And so as soon as do you want your stuff to be a store of value or a medium of exchange? Like as soon as you get into that debate, you are bound to, at best, rebuild the wonky version of the existing financial system.
You said reveal the what?
Like you're gonna rebuild.
Oh, rebuild what's already exists.
Like a weird version. Like all the details are gonna be different, but the overarching picture is gonna look the same, right? Because maybe we can explicit that a bit. But how does the current financial system came to be? Well, you gotta imagine that originally people start trading with precious metal, such as gold, and gold has many very good properties. It's scarce, it's fungible, all of that, right? But it's not very convenient as a medium of exchange. Especially when you start thinking about the context of the time. Like if you're a trader, you travel around by boat. You're gonna move in some other country, trade goods, come back. You need to transport a bunch of gold on your ship. It's very risky. You can get attacked, especially, like if you know that there are a bunch of ships traveling with a bunch of gold on them, right? Like that sounds like a pretty good idea to have your own ship.
Pirates.
With some weapons on it. And
yeah.
So it's pretty risky. It's just not a good way. But this is what you have when you trade with gold directly, right? So suddenly, instead of transporting your gold on your boat, you're gonna leave it to some guy's vault, and the dude is gonna issue some certificate that actually you have this much gold, and then you are gonna travel in some other country. You're gonna trade certificate with the guy at the other end. You come back with the good. You sell the good, right? Then at the end of the day, you can go back to the guy with the vault, trade your certificate for the gold, and if the exchange of money is asymmetric, if more money goes in one direction than the other, then the guy from the vault can make like one big exchange, maybe once a month or something like that with the other guy in the other country. And that exchange contains all the transaction, like it's the sum of all the transaction of all the people that use the services of those guys, right? So the cost of doing that is amortized over many, many people. So it's not very expensive for each of them individually, even though you need to transport some gold in like very secured manner through a bunch of countries, right? But then you start having liquidity problems, right? Because now the gold is in the vault, and maybe you would have needed the gold to be somewhere else, but it's in the vault. And so now what do you do to solve that liquidity problem? Well, the people from the vault, they're going to start emitting a percentage more certificate than they actually have gold. And you know that because not everybody is going to redeem the gold at the same time, they can do that and it still works, right? And this is fractional reserve banking. And like people often think as fractional reserve banking as some evil master plan by the banker, but it solves an actual problem. It solves a liquidity problem. If you say nobody can be fractional anymore, you're going to have a ton of liquidity problem, payment not going through all the time. So you kind of need to do that to some extent. And then, you see what there is, like if you go 50% fractional, you're probably okay. If you go 90% fractional, you're probably going to face a bank run. And, like somewhere in between is probably a good, point to settle on. And you have people in finance that compute those kind of things, and it's all good. And now we start to have something that is like kind of resemble what we have now, right? And you go down that road a few more steps, and you get the financial system that we have now. Now, if we backtrack all of that, we can see that at the root of all of it, the problem that we have is that we don't have a medium of exchange that is a good store of value as well. We have technology that are good for exchange, like those certificates. They are very convenient to exchange, and they eventually become banknotes. And then you have gold that is very strong monetary properties, but that is not convenient. And so, there is this concept of Chesterton fence. I don't know if you're familiar with that idea.
Sounds like German.
No, Chesterton. I think it's British. Chesterton fence. Chesterton.
Chesterton.
Yeah.
On the fence.
It's not on the fence. It's like, so there is this fence that is at Chesterton, right? Mm-hmm. And some dude is like, well, this fence is in the middle of nowhere. We should just remove it, right? Like it doesn't seem to be serving any purpose. So let's just get rid of it, right? Mm. And the other dude is like, well, you don't know why someone put that fence there in the first place, right? Mm. And maybe that person had a good reason to do that. And maybe that reason is not valid anymore and we should get rid of it. But maybe the reason is still there and you just don't know what it is, right? So before removing the fence, you need to understand why the fence was there in the first place.
Yes.
Right. And there is a lot of that is going on in crypto right now, where people are like, well, the existing system is not so good. And I can like wholeheartedly agree with that. But you need to understand where that system comes from, because if you get rid of it, you're going to get the problem back. And so you need to have a solution to that problem. Otherwise, you're going to rebuild like something that kind of look like the same thing. And so a lot of people in crypto, they're trying to remove that, but they have not solved the problem. And so they are getting it back. And we see that with Lightning Network is an excellent example of that, where you don't have scalability in layer one. You have something that have good monetary, they call it digital gold, right? And it's not for it's not for bad reasons. The system have good monetary property, but bad medium of exchange property. And what do you build on top of it? Well, a system in which you need to lock your coins and where you're trading scalability for liquidity, which is completely different from the guy keeping the gold in the vault, right? Like all the details are different, but the trade-off that you're making is exactly the same, because you are solving the same problem in the same way at the fundamental level. You are trading scalability for liquidity. So you're gonna have more scalability and more liquidity problems, like you did with the guy with the vault, because you didn't solve the problem. The actual problem was your technology was not a good store value and medium of exchange.
All right, so help me understand the liquidity thing. You said fractional reserve banking isn't actually fully evil. Maybe at 90% it's a bad idea, but at 50%, give me some examples of when you'll need some liquidity over and above the amount of reserve you have of whatever thing.
Yeah, so people are moving around all the time. They are exchanging payment with people in different banks, or even in the same banks, but in different places. And you want all those payments to go through, right? Like there would be a tremendous cost in the economy if many of those payments were to fail. But for those payments to be able to go through, if you go like no fractional at all, you need to make sure that all the banks individually that are involved in processing all those payments, they have enough money and at the moment where the payment goes through to be able to process it. Right. And because they don't know exactly how much money is going to flow like here and where, or what the flow is going to look like exactly, they need to, have a fair amount of padding, right? Because if they have just the right amount of money, that, this day there is more payment that is going in that direction. This other day there is more payment that is going there. So those extra payments that are not planned, if you have just the right amount of money, they are not going to go through. Plus, you're going to spend an ungodly amount of time and energy and at the end resources shuffling all that money around, right? So that every single place has the right amount of money all the time.
Right.
And so all in all, that's a very inefficient system because payment don't always go through. You spend a lot of energy like moving money around to make sure that there is enough in every places, because otherwise even less payment goes through, right? So that's an inefficient system that requires a lot of activity behind it to still works. And if you say, well, I estimate that at any given time, no more than 50% of my customers are going to ask their money. And in practice, you see that it's like much less than that. Like it would be a very, very unusual day for that to happen. If you say that, then you can say, well, I can have like that many more and that many more money in circulation, and I'm going to fall back on my feet without much problem. Obviously, the more you go fractional, the more risk you're taking, right? So now you have a cost if you don't do it, and you have a risk if you do it. And there is a crossing point, right? Like there is, because, well, you are always willing to take some amount of risk to reduce the cost, but at some point you are taking way too much risk to reduce the cost too much, and vice versa, right? So there is some equilibrium somewhere there, and the equilibrium is probably no fractional reserve at all.
So, oh wow, that's interesting. So I get it with our modern system. I'm thinking of like somebody like John Law. You familiar with his story?
Not really.
He's basically like credited with being like the father of fractional reserve banking. He had the Mississippi Company, which basically handled like the Louisiana Purchase and all of that. He operated in your country, France.
Yeah. Louisiana was sold by France. To the UK, and then France funded the revolution in the US. Like France backed the revolution in the US against the British after having sold Louisiana to the British. That was kind of a dick move, but
yes.
In many ways, that makes the American Revolution a proxy war between UK and France. If you look at it that way, it makes a lot of sense to see what the US military is doing now. Like they're reproducing the same pattern through which America as we know it today came to be.
You're touching on something golden there. No pun intended.
Well, a lot of people are going to be very pissed off by that, I guess. But,
they'll be all right.
This is historically accurate, but it's never that simple either, right? Like I'm making historical events are the result of millions of people making decisions at any given time, and you cannot describe them so simply in a few sentences. But this is definitely something that happened to some extent.
Absolutely. So Cremoni said, what if I had a solar powered quantum computer? Would that be a good mining rig?
Actually, probably not. You probably want to have a regular computer. But it's interesting, this image that quantum computer have, that people think of them as computers that are like way faster than the computer that we have right now. But they're actually computers in a very different way. They are not like the same kind of computer, just way faster. They do completely different forms of computation, which is way faster for some type of computation. Like actually, there are some computation that are so difficult to do with the computer that we have right now that, like, for all intent and purposes, you cannot do them, right? It would require way too much resources, even sometimes, like more than all the computer in the world for billions of years, that would not even be enough, right? That quantum computer can do like fairly easily, right? But it's true the other way around. There are a ton of computation that quantum computer are not very good at.
Mm.
So you should not expect the quantum computer to be that magical new kind of computer that's going to replace all the computer we have now and do everything better, because that's not it. Where computer are very interesting but a bit scary as well is that one of those computation that they are very, very efficient at doing are computation we rely on for security to be very, very difficult to make, right? So in crypto, for instance, we rely on digital signature. So with private key. So what that means is that you have your private key. It's a number, right? Everything in a computer is a number anyway, right? So it has to be, but it's actually a number, right? But a very, very, very big number,
right?
With many hundreds of digits, right? And you do some computation with that number that produce a result. And from that result, people are going to be convinced that, yeah, you have to know that secret number, because otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do that computation.
Right.
All right. But you don't want to reveal that secret number, right? So we rely on computation that are easy to do in one direction, but extremely difficult to do in the other direction. So that you can take your secret key, do the computation, come up with the result, share the result with people, and they can be convinced that, yeah, you can do that computation, but they cannot do the computation the other way around to find back your private key.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we rely on mathematical operations that are easy to do in one direction, but very difficult to do in the other direction.
You're talking about something like SHA-256.
Not really, because SHA-256 is actually impossible to go in the other direction. Like there is information losing. Like it's.
It only goes in one direction, though.
It only goes in one direction, but
right.
not because it's hard to go in the other direction. Just because
it's impossible.
It's impossible because look, SHA-256 produces a 256 bits result.
Right.
Right. There is a certain number of different possible results in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there is a finite amount. Yeah. Right. But there is an infinite amount of stuff that you can fit to the function.
Right.
Right. So any one of those results map to an infinite number of inputs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Not just one.
Right.
And therefore you cannot run the computation the other way around to go find the input, because there is not like one input to find.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just like, let's imagine, are you familiar with the modulo mathematical operation?
With the what? Modulo mathematical operation?
Modulo. Yeah.
Modular. No, I'm not.
Yeah. Modulo. So modulo is a mathematical operation where it's effectively the remainder of a division.
Okay.
Right. So if I tell you like, let's say 15 modulo 10, is going to be 5, right? Because when you divide 15 by 10, you get 1, and there is 5 that remains.
Right.
So that remainder is called the modulo. It's
okay.
I'm simplifying a bit. There are probably people screaming at the screen right now because it's different from negative number and all of that. But for this explanation, it's going to be enough.
Okay.
Well, now if I tell you, well, the result of the operation is 5, what was my number? Like, well, it could have been 5, but it could have been 15 or 25, or you like anything that when you divide by 10, you get 5 at the end, right? So yeah. It's a very simple example, but SHA-256 is a function that works in that way. There is like, it's not a two-way function. There is only one way. And the other way, you just get like Bayesian results.
But you were explaining something that was one way as well.
Yeah, so digital signature, they are not based on SHA-256. On Bitcoin and most of crypto, they are based on elliptic curve. Elliptic curve are a bit complicated mathematically, but maybe a simple way to look at it is multiplication.
Well, the reason why I brought up SHA-256 was because they're both one way.
SHA-256 is one way, but SHA-256 is like mathematically one way. There's like, going the other way is not an operation that makes sense.
Right.
Right. Whereas here, I need something that goes both ways, kind of, because I need to be able to prove to you that I know the specific input.
Right.
Right. And before, so right now most systems use elliptic curve, but before that we used actually multiplications. So I don't know how much you're familiar with prime number, but if you multiply two prime numbers between each other, there is only one way to go the other way around from the result. So say I have 3 and 7. 3 times 7 is 21. There is no other way to write 21 as a multiplication than 3 times 7. Right? There is no other multiplication that's going to give 21. So if you take two prime numbers are like specific numbers, but it's fairly easy to find them. Mathematically, we know to do that very well. And you multiply two together, you get a result. And that result, there is only one multiplication that gives that result.
Right.
But like if I give you 21, you're gonna find 3 times 7 like relatively easily. But I guess you probably kind of sense already that doing 3 times 7 is easier than me giving you 21 and you have to find out that it is 3 times 7. Right. But the number are like small enough so that you could do it, right? But if I do that with numbers that are hundreds of digit longs, there is no way you can do it. And even the modern computer is not going to be able to do it because it became too difficult.
Okay.
It doesn't mean like, theoretically it's possible, right? Like you could go over all the numbers and check them all one by one. If, like it's not a smart way to do it, but you can imagine that you do that. Eventually you're going to find the right one, right?
Right.
Except there are so many of those numbers, if you work with big numbers, that you're never going to find it, even if you pick all the computers in the world and make them work on that problem for millions of years. It's still not going to get nowhere close to explore enough number to have a reasonable chance to find it.
I see what you're saying.
But in the other direction, you just have to do a multiplication, which like, even if I were to give you by hand the multiplication to do with two numbers that would be 100 of digit long, that would be very fastidious and very long and very annoying. But, like given enough paper, you could do it.
Right.
Like even without a computer.
Yeah.
And a computer can do it in a fraction of a second, right? Because, computers are very good at one thing, and it's computing, right?
Right.
Hence the name. So that operation you can do in one direction very easily. You cannot do in the other direction very easily. And elliptic curve, you can use elliptic curve to build similar system where you can make the operation in one way very easily, and the operation in the other way is like so hard that for all practical purposes, it's like you should consider that it's impossible.
Yeah.
Oh, you froze.
Can you see me? Did I freeze? Am I here yet?
You froze for a moment.
Oh man.
I don't know if it's you or me.
Chat, am I good? Looks like I'm good on my end.
I have your sound. I have your picture now. So, okay, sorry.
Okay, we're good.
Where did I cut? Apologize.
You didn't. Everything went smoothly. I caught all of that.
Okay. So back to quantum computer, because this is where we were from. Quantum computer are very good at doing those operations the other way around. You give them a big number, they can find the multiplication that came up with it very efficiently. And for elliptic curve, it's the same. The mathematics are a bit more complicated, but the same way computers are very good at going the other way around and finding the solution. And this is why it's such a big topic, because all those crypto systems, and it's not just cryptocurrency, it's also like you use HTTPS to go on a website, it's using the same kind of mathematics behind. You use like payment online with your credit card, same kind of system. Like all of that is based on the same mathematics. And so suddenly, if we can make quantum computer big enough, we can do those operations the other way around. And then what happened of all the cryptography? It's a big question. It's literally a multi-billion-dollar question. It's probably $1 trillion question at this point.
Hell yeah, it is. Wow. Okay. Have you exhausted that topic?
I think so.
Okay, because you're so technical that I don't want to leave anything on the table, and I'm too ignorant to know when there's not more to speak about. Jay Pylon said, thoughts on elections verification tied to blockchain. You think that blockchain can be a solution for elections, or should be? Or is there a much simpler solution?
Both. So yeah, you can do. So one of the problem with election is that you have a set of constraints that is actually quite difficult to solve, right? Because you want the vote to be private,
right?
But at the same time, you want to be able to count all the vote and make sure that nobody cheated,
right?
Right? And intuitively, you can already sense that there is something there that is not that easy to solve, right?
Yeah.
There are ways to work around that with zero knowledge proofs. Mm-hmm. We're getting into like very fancy mathematics, but effectively like a zero knowledge proof is a way for me to prove that I did some computation correctly and that the result of the computation is what I say it is without giving you the input of the computation.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not that intuitive that you could do that, but you actually can. And okay, maybe what can I use as an example? One example that is often given is like, where is Waldo?
Yes.
Like, the game where,
he got the white and red sweater on with the little hat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it's a children game, right? Like there are books and you have those images with like bazillions of people on them.
Yeah.
And one of those person in that picture is Waldo and you have to find it, but there are like hundreds of people on this picture, right? So now imagine that I wanted to prove to you that I know where Waldo is on the picture, but I don't want to tell you where he is. I just want to prove to you that I know where he is, right? And intuitively that wouldn't be possible, right? Because if I say, well, I know where he is, he's there, right? But no, I've shown it to you, right? So that doesn't work. That's not a zero knowledge proof. That's a proof, but that's not a zero knowledge proof. And the way people like suggest you could do it is like you take a big sheet of paper that is like much bigger than the book, right? With the picture. And you poke a small hole in the middle of it. That is like the size of the head of Waldo, say.
Okay.
And just that, right? Then I can go behind that sheet of paper with my picture of Waldo and put the picture such as you can see just Waldo behind the hole. And because I can do that, I can prove to you that I know where he is, right? Because I can put it in front of the hole. But you don't see any of the rest of the picture. You don't even see like where is the picture relative to the hole. So you have no information about where Waldo is, right? And so that's the basic idea with zero knowledge proof is that this way, so there are equivalent mathematical constructs that you can use to prove that you did some stuff or some stuff or you did some computation and you computed the result and there is the result without giving the inputs. And using those, you can say, well, I counted all the votes. I counted it correctly. Here is the result of the election, but I'm not giving you who voted what.
I got you.
Right? You can use those kind of system. No, I think there is a big problem with doing that. And it's not a technical problem. It's like, or are you going to convince millions of people that, don't really know mathematics, that this is a correct way that works to verify an election? Like you have a big trust issue there, right? And trust in an election is super important. Like there is nothing else really, because like if people didn't believe, say in the US that Joe Biden is the president, like if there's nothing that the military or the army or the police or anything could do against like 3 million people being like, no, this dude is like not the president, right? So the fact that people trust the process and the result of the process is like paramount, or the election is completely useless. So I'd say it's a good technical solution, but it's probably not a good solution if you include the human factor.
Good technical solution, not a good social solution.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually like France is messed up in many ways, but I think the system is pretty good for elections. They have, so the way it works is that you have those boxes where you put your vote in, right? You go put your vote in an envelope and you put the envelope in the box, and the box is like completely transparent and like locked during the whole process. So anybody can be there and watch that, like nobody is putting a bunch of envelopes in it, or everybody can see that it is empty at the beginning of the day and all of that, right? And And then at the end of the day, like people open it and they count like everything that is on those envelopes, and same, like it's a public thing. You can go, like anyone can go and verify that this is done properly. So this is a more fastidious process than getting a computer to crunch the number. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, this is a process that everybody can understand, and it's pretty hard to cheat.
Bit different from how we do it here in the US?
Yeah, well, I'd say like first in the US, you have like voting machines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, that is like... that is easy to screw with. So I don't know, right? Like,
say no more. Say no more. Svenstead said, Bitcoin is cool, but metal energy food is power. What the hell is he talking about?
Metal energy food? I don't know what that is.
Metal energy food? What the hell is this? That's like some Ninja Turtle stuff, man.
So food and energy, yes. I would not though heat metal to get energy. That probably doesn't work.
He says, I googled this. It says, "Can food give off enough energy to melt metal?" Is what's coming up. I don't think that's what he's talking about. I don't think upcycling food.
Enough food, you know.
Yeah, it's cool. Metal energy food is power. Sven said, "Please clarify." Amaury, what do you want people to do with Ecash? What are the plans for Ecash? But what do you want people to do with it? Do you want people to buy it and speculate on it?
I want people to use it more than speculate. Oh crap!
Did you die on me?
Can you just froze again? My internet.
It's that French internet.
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know. I have optic fiber in the, you know, like this is something that surprised me. I actually lived in the US for a few years when I was working for Facebook, and I was in the Bay Area, and I was quite surprised how bad the internet was actually, like, and how expensive it is. I don't know if it's the same everywhere in the US, but I was pretty surprised. Yeah, I've 500 meg symmetric optic fiber to the home, and it costs €30 a month. And it's not crazy. In some European country, you have even better than that. Like if you go to Romania, the same stuff is like €10 a month, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see what he's saying. He's basically saying Bitcoin is cool, but metal, energy, and food is power. Oh. Well, yeah. I mean, you're missing guns, because you're gonna need guns to protect your metal, energy, and your food.
At some point,
yeah. But I would definitely throw defense in there somewhere. But yeah, I think Bitcoin is like after you've settled all those, right? Like now that we have our metals, we have our energy, we have our food, how do we transact with billions of people in an efficient way?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting transition to like, why are we doing what we're doing with Ecash, right? Mm-hmm. And there is something that we take for granted that is actually not granted at all, and it's cash. Right? Mm-hmm. It's like, because like if we see each other and I pay you something in cash, mm-hmm. there is a transaction that goes from me to you directly. Nobody else is involved.
Right.
That doesn't exist in digital form at all. Right. I mean,
it's got a process. It has to go through some sort of processor.
Yeah, but more importantly, before cryptocurrencies, all those processors were a centralized entity.
Right.
And that means that the day that entity decide that no, that payment is not going through,
it's not going through.
It's not going through, right? And there is nothing that you can do. And so effectively, your money is not money anymore, right? Like you cannot spend it like you want. And you can be like, how often does that happen? Well, that has happened with WikiLeaks. That has happened with the trucker in Canada, right? So right now, that doesn't happen like wide scale, because right now there is still enough cash so that, if you started doing that to everybody all the time, then people would revert back to cash. Except cash is going away, like it's disappearing at an alarming rate. And in some country, there is almost no cash at all, right? Like if you go to Sweden, for instance, I was I was in Sweden like before the pandemics. In many places, they don't take cash anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just at the airport and I tried to buy a burger and I pulled out cash and she was like, "Yeah, no, we don't. You got to have a credit card." And I was,
we don't
she
do
was
that
like,
around here. Yeah,
yeah. She's like, the entire airport is like that.
Yeah. So and like this is coming, right? And more of like even you say, well, I'm still gonna use cash. Well, you cannot buy stuff online with cash, right? So. More and more of our life is moving online. Like that means that you cannot buy anything on the internet, for instance.
Right.
Like that greatly limits your options. And cash is going away more and more. And what is replaced with is a system where you don't control your money at all. And people don't quite realize because it hasn't been abused as much in Western countries, right? But if I say you cannot spend your money, well, you don't have a home anymore, right? Because you cannot pay rent unless you own your home, right? But all the people that rent, like they don't have a home anymore. But even if you have your home, you don't have food anymore, right? you cannot put gas in the car. You are in an instant, you are completely excluded from society. And this is what the gulags of this century, this is what they're going to look like. That's like, we're going to unplug you from the monetary system. And no, like, we don't even need to build a camp or whatever, right? Like, we just do nothing with you. Like, there is nothing you can do.
And this will be made possible with the CBDC as well.
Oh yeah, the CDBC is like the next step there. And what I find very fascinating with the CDBC is that it is the power in place. Right now, the power in place can do this kind of stuff through intermediaries such as banks and payment processors, right? With the CDBC, they don't need the banks and the payment processor anymore. Right. And I think the banks, they haven't quite caught up to that yet, but it's really bad for them as well. And it's really bad for us because before you need to coordinate with the bank, but many banks, so that's difficult, even though they can do it better and better as they learn, as they learn how to do it. But without the banks being in the loop, it's really scary. Like, I think people don't quite realize how scary this is, but this is a level of control of people that have never existed at any point in history. Like, never any dictator in history had this power ever. Like, not Hitler, not Mao, not Stalin, like, no. And now you can imagine, like, what would they be able to do with that kind of power? And I think the second thing that people don't quite realize is that, well, you can say, well, but it was in Russia or in Germany or whatever, like almost 100 years ago. Like, it's not the world we live in anymore. But like, is it? Those people, they elected those leaders, right?
Yeah, right.
They were living in democracy. Actually, this is like frighteningly similar to what we're living now. Like, if you look at Germany before the whole Nazi situation, it was the Weimar Republic. The country was in debt. They printed a bunch of money to pay the debt. There was inflation through the roof. Like, tell me if that reminds you something, right? Then it caused shortages and stuff like that. Like, have you heard of that situation somewhere?
It sort of sounds familiar.
Yeah. And at some point, some dude comes around and is like, you know what? The financial system is controlled by the Jews, and it's their fault if you are all poor and there is all this inflation and all of that. And we're gonna solve that problem, right? And at some point, this gets so bad that people are gonna like, okay, all right, let's go with it, right?
Yeah.
And those people, they are like us. They are like us, and the majority of them, they eventually voted for that. And like, this is something actually, like, if you have not understood, you could, eventually, like, a series of events could lead you to go for that and vote for a guy like that. Yeah. You probably would, right? Because at some point you need to understand how that came up to be. We all have the kind of bias that can be exploited to do that. You need to understand those bias in yourself, like, to look at it and do the work on yourself, to be confident that you will do the right thing. If you have not done that, you almost certainly will, when the day comes, do the wrong thing. Millions of people did it, right? It's the normal thing to do.
All right, since you've scared my, half of my audience off with the
Well,
doomsday.
but that's what I'm saying with the CDBC, right? So I'm like, we really need the plan B, against that. And in the beginning, Bitcoin seemed to be the plan B, but no, it's not a good medium of exchange. It's not a good plan B, because what are you gonna use to trade Bitcoin? You cannot transact on chain, like especially if there is a crackdown of the financial system in like 10, 20 years or so, and people cannot use it, like all the transactions flow on Bitcoin. Then what are you gonna do? Like the chain is gonna be 10 times more congested than it is now. Right? You're not gonna pay like $200 fees to buy, like bread or whatever, right? It just doesn't make sense unless the dollar have gone down so much that it makes sense. I hope not, but that's that's not gonna work. The way people use Bitcoin right now is through intermediaries, right? So you're back to square one. You can control the intermediaries and voila,
Centralization.
Yeah. So you cannot control Bitcoins, but you can control the intermediaries through which people use Bitcoin. And so it's just as good as controlling Bitcoin as far as the authorities are concerned. So this doesn't solve the problem. And this is why we're working on Ecash, because we want to make sure that the system is scalable enough, so that people can actually use it. And really, this is what I want to impress on people. Like, this is important to learn to use it, because once it's time to use it, it's too late.
Yeah. Interesting. So what happened with Bitcoin Cash, man? You were over there at Bitcoin Cash. It seems like things were going honky dory, and then the split, the fork came.
I mean, that's a bit depressing, to be honest. Like, it's like seeing your baby, start taking meth and and cocaine and whatever, and then doing random crime and ruining their life, right? Like, that's really the impression I have with BCH. Like really, what happened is that there was misaligned incentives with the funding, right? And we're effectively we were doing like the load-bearing work effectively, but the load-bearing work is not like the flashy work or anything. And we were struggling the whole way to have the kind of funding that would, allow us to continue to do that. And also like take the step to not just do maintenance, but build the next iteration of that thing, like bring it to the next level. And we were never really in a position to do that. So at some point we were like, okay, we need to have some kind of self-funding mechanism in there. And most of the community was against that. And so we're like, all right, then we're going on with Ecash. And ever since then, like BCH has been doing, so it's rather sad to see, like, even when you leave the project, like you created it, it's kind of your baby in a way. You want it to be wrong, right? You want it to be like, okay, I thought there was a funding problem and the incentive were misaligned, but actually I was wrong and it works anyway, like that would have been great. But clearly, unfortunately, I was right.
So again, my ignorance won't allow me to understand what you just said. So you got to break that down. You guys want to take on VC money or something like that to handle the money problem?
No, we don't need to, because we have a self-funding mechanism.
No, I mean with BCH though. With BCH, that was what was happening.
So BCH, mostly the work was funded by whales, effectively.
Okay.
People who had the large amount of BCH.
Speculators. Whale speculators were pumping the coin.
Well, people who had large holding in BCH and wanted it to be well maintained, so that the value of their holding would would do well.
Right.
But a lot of those people, they were not like technical people or anything. They didn't really understand what was needed. And on one hand, you're there, you try to explain them, and on the other hand, you have people like selling the dream effectively. And in crypto, like people want to believe the dream, but in that case, it was not realistic, and we can see that reflected now.
And so explain the self-funding mechanism and how that works.
Oh, so every time a block is found, right, on Bitcoin system, every time a block is found, there is an amount of new money that is created and that is sent to the miner that find the block. This has been modified in Ecash, and there's a portion of that, 8%, that goes into two funds, so 4 and 4%. 4% goes to us for the development work, and 4% goes into an entity that we call the GNC, where large holders and large holders can decide how to allocate those funds to fund stuff in the ecosystem.
And this is from each transaction?
From each block.
Each block, right. My bad. Interesting. Okay. That makes sense. Tobias Ruck said Ecash on Coinbase app. I actually don't work with Coinbase app anymore. And they're a Bitcoin maxi company. So they probably won't take on Ecash.
That's unfortunate. Like, I don't get the whole maximalist mindset. It's very bizarre.
Yeah.
To me, it's very reminiscent to, like the anti-crypto people.
Yeah.
Like, the discourse is very similar, right? They are like, oh, well, I believe in the dollar, or I believe in gold and whatever. And everything that is, a bit further away from that is a scam, right? And those people, it's like they made one more step and they included like BTC into the group, and then they go they go having the same discourse. Exactly. That's a very bizarre things to do. But
yeah, I could never really wrap my mind around the Bitcoin maxi thing, because when I think about, well, when you talk crypto, we're using the term decentralization. So if we're talking about decentralization, that means choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I want a lot of different currencies. I want to have the choice in what transaction I'm going to, use for various purposes, right? I want that. We need to diversify money, right? When we look at money today, money is diversified. It's not just a dollar. You got the ruble, you got the rupee, you got the yen, money is technically diversified. So why wouldn't we diversify crypto? Like, that's the thing that I can't just wrap my mind around.
Yeah, plus obviously there are different trade-offs that are gonna make sense and that people are gonna want to make. Like, look, if you just look at BTC and Ethereum,
yeah.
You have a very obvious trade-off. Like, Ethereum is way more complicated. It has an account model that doesn't scale as well, and so on. But at the same time, it do smart contract, right? And some people seems to see value in that, and that's fine. And you can't get the same property you get out of Bitcoin on Ethereum. And
wait, say that again. You glitched
like,
out. When you said that?
You won't get the same properties. From one to the other. It's like it's just different trade-off. It's different point in the design space, right? It's like you bring that to any other market, it's completely obvious that it's nonsense. It's like, well, I only want sports car, right? I don't want I don't want Berlin, I don't want SUV, I only want sports car. This is the only car that makes sense. Well, no, I mean, like, that's I don't know how to put it, but there are gonna be like plenty of car with different people that have different uses for their car, and that's fine, right? And
right.
I don't see, like, this is the same for every market that exists, for every product that exists. There is no reason why that would be any different for crypto.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. But however,
I guess there is a bit of insecurity behind that, right? It's like, oh, maybe.
Yeah, competition.
Maybe the other are gonna eat my lunch, right? Like, maybe they are too good and I'm not competitive. I don't know. But realistically speaking, Bitcoin, just because it's been there forever, it's it has a proven track record, at least within the crypto space. It's very secure, and also it has a property, I think, that the Bitcoin people understand, but the rest of the crypto space doesn't. It's like the fact that they changed nothing is a value in itself. Because even though that it's never going to be really good, because it's never going to really improve in any meaningful way, right? That in 10 years or 20 years, you're going to get the exact same thing, right? Whereas if I have some Ethereum somewhere in 20 years, I don't know what I have. I don't know the property of that thing. There's probably the property of the thing that I have are probably going to be very different in 20 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And maybe better by the standard of the Ethereum community. Mm-hmm. But is this going to be better by my standard? Right? And is it actually what I want? I don't know. Whereas with Bitcoin, I know that I'm not going to get the best stuff, but I know what I'm getting, and I know what it is. I know what it's going to be in 10 years. I know what it's going to be in 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a desirable property, I think. And I think that's a property that the very fast-paced innovation of the crypto space tends to overlook a bit.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. However, if the Bitcoin maxis want to cut me a check and make me a Bitcoin maxi, I can send you my bank account and routing number, and we can work something out. I can be persuaded to understand your philosophy. And that goes for any coin out there. Well, not any. I can't say any, but if it sounds sound, I'm down. Amaury, the conversation today has been absolutely exhilarating, absolutely educational. I have to watch it 3-4 times again just to hear it back. If you ever want to talk about any topics, or you want to bring up Ecash, or you want to talk about something new and great, as you can see here, I'm holding on to my real cash tightly. Hopefully it'll be valid someplace.
Well, you have some up there. Not the same, but there is something that we do in pretty much every country, but the US is having those in different shape and colors and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That's a great innovation. You guys should think about it.
What, different shapes?
Well, they're all rectangles, but different sizes.
Different sizes, right? My bad. Different sizes, right? Yeah. We all have all ours in one shape. But you're right. I
don't know. Blind people do it in the US, for instance. Like all the bills, they're all the same size and they feel the same.
Yeah.
So what do blind people do to pay?
Maybe they can feel the ink on here, and they can actually feel the one. I'm wondering if they can feel
I don't know.
The one. I don't know. It could be. I want to say I heard somebody say that blind people can tell the difference between money, but I could be wrong. Who knows? I'm going to be on with Michael Malice in about 15 minutes. You guys can meet me over there on his channel. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. Amaury, I took Cyprian's class, so I'm familiar with Ecash.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got the Bitcoin Mystery School. I always tell people, if you want to learn about Bitcoin and crypto, you need to take his class.
Yeah, you're going to definitively learn something very different from what all the people that are trying to peddle their stuff teach.
Yeah.
Because really, this is the crux. Like, this is the number one problem in the crypto space. Everybody has something to tell you, and therefore nobody is really going to say something objective. But it's probably one of those places that is a bit different. First, like Vin or Cyprian now, like he has no coin, right? Like he's not someone who created the coins that he's trying to sell it to you. So
right.
The only thing he has to sell to you is the knowledge and experiences acquired over the years.
Right. Exactly. Yes. There's no bias. You're going to get the real for real. Yeah. When I took his course, it was a 3-day course. Like the first day, maybe 30 minutes or an hour in, I'm like, because I think it's a 3-hour course. For like the first 30 minutes or an hour, I'm just like, it's just like, all the neurons are firing in my brain, and it's just amazing information.
Yeah, because everything you heard before that is, oh, put a bunch of money on that and it's going to go to the moon and then you're going to be a millionaire, right?
Yeah. And he's talking about something fundamentally different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another Sharpe conversation. This will be up on Apple, Spotify, and SoundCloud in the coming days, hopefully. So I'll see you next time. Amaury, hold on while I close out the show.
Okay.